Madam President, I rise for a second time today, and this time in opposition to Senate Joint Resolution 9, a Congressional Review Act resolution to disapprove of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's rule protecting a bird known as the Lesser-Prairie chicken under the Endangered Species Act. Before I explain why my colleagues should reject this resolution, let me first answer two basic questions that some who may be watching this debate could be asking. First, what is a lesser-prairie chicken? And second, why do we need to protect it? And those are two pretty good questions. Native to the southern Great Pines, the lesser-prairie chicken has long been considered an indicator for healthy grasslands and prairies upon which hundreds of species depend. So if the lesser-prairie chicken is in peril, in time other species could be in peril as well. Today, the lesser-prairie chicken can be found in 5 states: Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. We know that this colorful and some would say charismatic bird's distinctive call was once a familiar part of the prairie soundscape, so much so that it has earned a reputation in ceremonial dancers of several Native American tribes in celebration in communities across its multi-state habitat. Sadly, the population of the lesser-prairie chicken has declined by some 97% throughout the last century, 97%. This decline is primarily due to loss of habitat and climate-related drought in the West. In addition to the cultural and ecological loss that come with a declining prairie chicken population, there are negative impacts for communities as well. For example, a local prairie chicken festival in Roosevelt County, New Mexico, hasn't been held since 2012 because there are no longer enough birds in the area to sustain this tourism. There are no lesser prairie chickens in 45 of our 50 states. There are none that we're aware of. Still, we know firsthand the benefits that wildlife tourism can have on local economies. For example, people travel from all across the country and actually around the world to come to Delaware to see a beloved bird called the red knot. And that is a familiar face and a welcome face along the shores of Delaware. This tiny bird, which is now a threatened species due to climate change, migrates more than 18,000 miles. It's a tiny little bird. And more than 18,000 miles each year on its round trip from the southern tip of South America to the tundra of North Arctic. Along the way, flocks of red knots stop for lunch. And they stop for lunch in Delaware. They stop for lunch along our beaches in Delaware. And they stop and they lunch on horseshoe crab eggs, often doubling their weight during this process. It is quite the spectacle. Horseshoe crabs have been around for millions of years. And every year during certain parts of the year, they lay their eggs. And they lay them a lot right along the Delaware beaches. And the red knots come in and swoop them up and go to town, having literally doubling their weight before they head north or head south. People come from all over the world to witness this. And when they come from all over the world, they stay in our hotels. They eat in our restaurants. We have no sales tax. They shop safe with no sales tax. And for us, it's a pretty good thing. And it's an even better deal for the red knots. But they benefit, and frankly, so do we in our economy. So while some might suggest that providing Endangered Species Act protections for the lesser-prairie chicken would hinder economic development, I have given our experience in Delaware, I have a different perspective based on our experience with threatened and endangered species in the first state. And Delaware is not the only state that pays homage to our nation's iconic birds. In fact, 5 National Football League teams use birds as their mascot, including the Seattle Seahawks, the Arizona Cardinals, the Atlanta Falcons, Baltimore Ravens, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Go Birds. In addition, the great state of Louisiana is known as the Pelican State. And today, the distinctive brown pelican is thriving along Louisiana's coast because of the Endangered Species Act. To the west, the well-loved California condor actually became extinct in the wild in the year 1987, but with the help of the Endangered Species Act, there are now more than 550 condors in the wild. Unfortunately, Endangered Species Act protections for the lesser-prairie chicken have been delayed for decades, and now the species is in serious peril, which is why we should not wait any longer. Some of our colleagues who oppose this rule for the lesser-prairie chicken have claimed that the Fish and Wildlife Service did not properly account for long-standing voluntary conservation efforts, and that's just not true. While I commend the voluntary actions to conserve the lesser-prairie chicken, the science shows that existing efforts are not nearly enough to protect and recover the species. That said, even with the data clearly demonstrating the need for enhanced protection for this extraordinary bird, the Fish and Wildlife Service worked hard to create a flexible rule that would mitigate the negative impacts on impacted industries. Specifically, the many years of voluntary conservation actions are not for naught. Under the Biden rule, those voluntary actions will remain the foundation for current habitat conservation plans to protect lesser prairie chickens while allowing continued industry operations. Under the rule, farmers, ranchers, and energy producers can generally continue their normal activities as long as they adhere to reasonable conservation plans. That is true even if these activities have a small negative impact on the species. And this flexibility applies to the range for the entire northern population, including all the known habitats in Kansas, in Colorado, and Oklahoma, and about half of the state of Texas. What's more, the Fish and Wildlife Service delayed the effective date of this rule for 60 days to allow more time to work with partners and to work with stakeholders. Doing so allowed impacted industries to create conservation plans and minimize disruption to activity in the region. The service also continues to collaborate closely with states to ensure that all interested parties have the tools that they need in order to comply with the rule. Despite this effort by the Fish and Wildlife Service to ensure a smooth implementation, this CRA resolution would take a sledgehammer to the rule. And this CRA is indeed a sledgehammer. If enacted, this resolution would not only invalidate the rule issued by the Fish and Wildlife Service, but it could also prevent the service from ever issuing a listing for the lesser prairie chicken in the future. To put it simply, enacting this resolution could set this species on a path to continued decline and eventual extinction. The resolution also undermines the Endangered Species Act. And how is that, you might ask? Well, this resolution violates the basic premise that the law should be applied based on science and not politics. In 2019, an intergovernmental panel issued an alarming report. What did that report say? Well, that report found that roughly 1 million species on our planet are in danger of extinction. Let me just say that again. 2019, 4 years ago, an intergovernmental panel issued an alarming report. And what did it report? They found that roughly 1 million species on our planet are in danger of extinction. We know that preserving our planet's biodiversity is critical for innovation, it's critical for human health, and it's critical for our environment. And the Endangered Species Act is our best tool for protecting species and preserving biodiversity. So let me conclude, Madam President, this afternoon by offering a reminder of what's at stake here today. Extinction is forever. Let me say that again. Extinction is forever. And overturning this listing may well mean the permanent loss of an iconic American species that would harm our planet, that we pass on to future generations, and the communities and cultures that hold the lesser prairie chicken in high regard. For all these reasons, Madam President, I oppose this resolution. I strongly urge our colleagues to join me and others in voting no. And with that, Madam President, I yield back the balance of my time. Thanks so much.